All right, team, we'll get started. Firstly, let me thank you all so much for being here. I know there's so many other things you could have chosen to do with this beautiful Sunday afternoon. Have a coffee, walk the dog, watch a movie, but instead you chose to be here, and honestly that is fantastic because it means you've taken that first step to learning about your health. Now, this talk is not specifically for people who want to lose weight. It's for everybody to learn about. We're going to be covering your metabolism, we're going to be covering hormones, we're going to be covering genetics, we're going to cover everything. It's going to be a lot of information. So any way that you can take that information away with you, please do. You can take notes on the back of that recipe page, or if you have a pen, go grab a pen. You can audio record this on your phone, you can take videos, you can take pictures. Any way that you can get the information that I'm giving to you and go away with it, the better. So if you've got a notebook in your bag, do take it out now. We are going to be covering a lot of information, so if you would like a copy of this PowerPoint at the end of it, do just come up and have a chat to me, and I will jot your email address down, and I'm more than happy to send it through because it also does have references if you're interested in where I got the information from. All right, so how today is going to run is it's going to be a 45-minute presentation, and then we're going to have roughly 15 minutes for questions. That is where you guys can ask all the questions that have been burning inside your brain throughout the entire presentation, and I will also ask some questions of you guys. We do have some hats and drink bottles as prizes today, so there will be several points where I say, hey team, take a mental screenshot of this slide because it will be in the pop quiz. So do keep that in mind, and I know that 45 minutes sounds like a long time. It won't feel like a long time because we're covering a lot. That being said, if at any point you need to get up, stretch your legs, go for a drink of water, go to the bathroom, you are more than welcome to do that. The bathroom is just straight out that door there and just straight through the corridor. All right, we'll get started. My name is Amber. I'm a registered sports nutritionist, holistic health coach, performance nutritionist, and I am a health and performance specialist with The Sports Nutritionist. So with The Sports Nutritionist, we are built upon a foundational belief that nutrition shouldn't be complicated, it shouldn't be overwhelming, and it shouldn't be something that is scary, which I know it is for a lot of people. So what we do is travel around giving free community talks like this. We talk to charities, sports teams, the community. We also offer exercise programs, nutrition programs, and we also do body composition testing. So basically we look at your blood pressure, your blood sugar, we look at how much fat you've got underneath your skin, around your organs. We look at you as a whole picture because I think especially with body composition testing, no one really looks at your health, but it's so important and when we're talking about performance, it's life performance. So if you want to pick up a box and put it on a shelf, that is you basically doing a squat and then doing a push, right? And so that is life performance, and it's super, super important. So that's why I'm here, basically. So the more information you guys can leave with and the more help I can be to you guys, the better it is for everybody. All right, so when we are talking about weight, according to the Ministry of Health, New Zealand has the third highest rate of adult obesity in the entire EOCD, which is a combination of 38 different countries, which is really high. 1 in 3 adults in New Zealand, which is over 15 years old, are classified as obese, and 1 in 10 children, which is really high. Now, when we're talking about the long-term effects of this, children are more likely to be obese as adults because they have developed those eating habits, and they have also basically prepared their metabolic system to store a lot of fat, basically from being a child to being an adult. They also have really high cholesterol, they are far more likely to develop diabetes, they have high blood pressure, they have musculoskeletal problems because they're still growing, so their joints and their cartilage kind of grow differently, and they are also at far higher risk of asthma and psychological problems. For adults, they are far higher likelihood to develop type 2 diabetes, have heart disease, stroke, develop cancer, osteoarthritis, sleep problems, and also have reproductive issues. So there's quite a combination of flow-on effects there. Everything kind of compounds by your body storing excess adipose tissue. Now, the reason why, according to the Ministry of Health, the reason why this society does have an issue with holding a little bit too much adipose tissue is 4 main reasons. Firstly, our environment is saturated with food. Not only is it super, super easy to find food, you know, we don't have to hunt for it anymore, but also the marketing is impeccable. You know, like you sit down to watch TV and all of McDonald's, you know, so much food saturation is in our face all of the time. Socioeconomics. In this environment, it is, or in our economic environment, it is really hard to afford the good foods, you know, especially if you've eaten a type of way your entire life, it's worked really well for you, and now with the economic crash that we are going through, it is really difficult to afford what society deems good food. And you know, when you can no longer afford that level of food, where do you go from there, you know? And also education around food. I think especially as an adult, it is really difficult to know where to find good education around food. We go to social media, and especially if the video looks good and sounds good and whoever's speaking is really fit, it is really, really difficult to tell who's qualified and who is not qualified. Genetics. So if you have overweight or obese parents, you have a far higher likelihood of being obese yourself. And then birth factors. So if your mum smoked, if she had really poor nutrition, if she was overweight, again, you are at far higher likelihood of storing excess adipose tissue. So what we're going to be covering today is, as we do in every seminar, and I know I see a few familiar faces, so you guys will have heard this before, but we cover macronutrients because ultimately nutrition is founded upon macronutrients. You have to understand macronutrients to understand what we're talking about. So we always go, every single seminar, we will go over macronutrients, which is fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Then we will get into the science of adipose tissue, why different populations store different rates of adipose tissue, what adipose tissue is, and then we will also be talking about steps that you guys can take to apply in your own life or the lives of people that you love to decrease adipose tissue storage. All right, so macronutrients. When we're talking about macronutrients, it's 3 things. Every single thing you eat is broken down into 3 things. Firstly, carbohydrates. Now, it's super important to realize that carbohydrates are fuel in the body. That is one of their main roles. It's fueling the body. Now, when we're talking about sports and carbohydrates, it fuels fast activity. So if you were to go for a sprint, if you were going to play netball, basketball, hockey, you know, all of those sports uses carbohydrates for fuel. But then when we're talking about health, it has a massive role in our gut microbiome and our digestive health. So that's carbohydrates. Carbohydrates equal fuel. Keep that in your brains. When we're talking about dietary fats, they are fuel and structure. So unlike carbohydrates, which are just fuel, fats are fuel and structure. So when we're talking about sports, they fuel slow, long sports like marathon running. They are also fueling you guys sitting here right now. When we're standing, when we're walking for 7 hours, for example, it's fats that is being used in our body for fuel. When it comes to our health, so the structural part of dietary fat, it is super important for our hormones, especially our sex hormones, and also super important for the absorption of vitamins and for our immune system. When we're talking about dietary protein, it is specifically structure. So protein doesn't have a fuel role in our body, it is structure. So I want you guys to remember that. Carbohydrates equal fuel, dietary fats equal structure as well as fuel, and then proteins equal structure. So remember that, it's going to be in the pop quiz. All right, so talking about carbohydrates a little bit, that carbohydrates can be broken down into 2 different things, simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. Now, when we're talking about simple carbohydrates, that is all of your lollies, your energy drinks, all of the foods in the bakery section in the supermarket, and their main role is to be a fast release form of fuel. So they are really, really good at halftime when you're playing a sports game, but other than that, if you're not about to, eat some chocolate and then go for a sprint, your body will likely store that as fat. When we're talking about complex carbohydrates, they are larger molecules and they are digested far slower. So when we're talking about fast release carbohydrates, it's a tidal wave of energy entering our system. Complex carbohydrates, which are slow release carbohydrates, basically drip feeding energy. So with this one, you get an energy spike and an energy fall. When we're talking about your complex carbohydrates, it's kind of sustained because it's being drip fed, as shown here. So when we're talking about simple, these are the fast release carbohydrates. You get a massive spike in your blood sugar or your blood glucose because carbohydrates are converted into glucose in your body. And then your body releases a bunch of insulin because one of the main roles of insulin is to buddy up to a glucose and bring it to a muscle cell, open the door of the cell, and push glucose in and slam the door, basically. So when we get to here, our body releases a bunch of insulin, which causes our blood glucose to drop below baseline here because our body has released a lot of insulin. When we drop below that baseline level, that is when we feel terrible. We have no energy, we don't want to do anything, we have a headache, we feel a little bit sick. That is what is happening on a physiological level inside your body. That's what's happening. When we're talking about complex carbohydrates, so all of your vegetables, that is drip-fed energy, so you don't get that same spike, and it's basically just sustainable energy. All right, so on either end of the scale, examples of this is honey, milk, candy, sliced and pastries, and soda and energy drinks. Now the main difference between fast release energy, which is simple carbohydrates, and slow release energy, which is complex carbohydrates, is how nutrient dense they are and how calorie dense they are. Now fast release energy, so simple carbohydrates, are often very nutrient light and calorie dense. On the other hand, with complex carbohydrates, they are often calorie light but nutrient dense. So you often get a lot more, basically bang for your buck with complex carbohydrates because you're actually giving your body nutrition rather than just energy. All right, so the general rule of thumb when we are talking about carbohydrates is half of your plate should be fibrous carbohydrates. So that's all your vegetables, mostly just your vegetables. So half of your plate should be vegetables. And then when we're talking about your potato, your corn, your pasta, your breads, that should be roughly a quarter of your plate. So that's generally the rule of thumb when it comes to serving sizes of those energy sources. When we're talking about protein, as we mentioned before, it is just structure. So it has a massive, massive role in your health and your recovery if you are someone who's quite active. So protein is so important in our body that we will literally die if we don't have enough of it. I know a lot of people hear protein and they go, nah, I don't need any, it's just for athletes or bodybuilders. Not true at all. Every single person needs a level of protein and that level actually increases as we age. So really, 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 really important for our muscles, our tissues, our immune cells, our organs. Basically everything in our body is built on some level from protein. All right, really great sources of protein in terms of animal sources is obviously your meats, whether that's dried, cooked, or canned, your fish, your eggs, your dairy, and then we've got a bunch of plant sources over there as well. I will touch on the fact that a lot of people say, I am a vegetarian, I'm probably under-eating my protein. The reason why everyone says, you can't get really muscly on plant protein, it comes down to bioavailability. So basically that means if you eat a certain amount of protein, how much of it is actually getting used in your body rather than just getting excreted. So 90% of animal protein gets used in your body, it gets absorbed into your cells, whereas 83% of plant protein gets absorbed. So it's a little bit lower. So if you are a vegetarian, you just need to overshoot your protein mark just a little bit to account for that change in bioavailability. That being said, plant protein is often really high in fiber and also comes along with a lot more micronutrients than animal protein does. So do keep that in mind. If you are a vegetarian or a sole plant eater and you don't eat any animal sources in this room, do keep in mind that animal sources are the only source of vitamin B12. So if you are a vegetarian, you could be deficient in B12, and B12 is one of those things that doesn't actually show up as a deficiency until you're quite deficient, so you don't start having symptoms until you're very much in the red. So if you are a vegetarian, might be worth next time you go see your GP, just mention that you would like your B12 tested. When we're talking about fat, it is fuel and structure. So as we mentioned before, it fuels long, slow activity like walking and like marathons. Again, we will die if we don't eat enough fat. It is very important. So we can survive without carbohydrates because our body basically adapts and starts using fat as a form of fuel. That's what is happening if you were on a ketogenic diet, for example. But we will die if we don't have enough protein or enough fat. When it comes to sports, fat is really important because it aids in your recovery and also makes you less tired earlier, basically. So it sustains how long you have that energy availability for. And then for life, it is super important, as we mentioned, for your hormones and also for the absorption of vitamins and decreasing inflammation in your body. Really great examples of fat sources are nuts and seeds, canned tuna, avocado with cheese, and then just general daily sources. You can have olive oil and you can have meats and butter. All right, so I don't know why my pictures have not shown up there, but that's fine. So when we're talking about what your plate should look like in terms of these macronutrients, because remember that's what we're talking about, there are 3 macronutrients and these are them. Carbohydrates, half of your plate should be vegetables, quarter should be your breads, pastas, rice, those sorts of things. If you are finding that you don't need those pastas, rice, bread, those sorts of things, you don't have to eat them. It's far better for you to prioritize vegetables over those less nutrient-dense foods. When we're talking about protein, it should be quarter of your plate. So we've covered half of your plate being vegetables, quarter of them being your breads, quarter of your plate should be protein, whether that is your plant or your animal sources, and then you should also have 2 thumbs worth of fat, whether that is cheese, whether that's mixed nuts and seeds, whether that is the fat that you've cooked your food in. Do just keep that in mind, and that is a really, really good way to make sure you are fueling your body the way it needs to be fueled. All right, so if you eat what your body needs you to eat in regards to your macronutrients, so if you're eating enough fat, if you're eating enough protein, if you're eating enough carbohydrates, you sleep better, you have way more energy, you have decreased fat stores because basically your body isn't in panic mode and trying to hoard all of the energy it can. You have increased power and strength, you have increased muscle mass, stronger immune system so you won't get as sick as often, you have more brain power, and you have a way better mood. So basically it compounds into every area of your life. If you are not eating enough protein, for example, that will be snowballing, even as simple as decreased energy and poor sleep or waking up tired. You know, if you've slept 9 hours and you're like, man, that was a good sleep, but I am exhausted still, could be because you're not eating enough in terms of your macronutrients. All right, so this is the part you guys are all interested in. Weight loss. So for the next slides, we're going to be covering 6 main points. We're going to be talking about the importance of adipose tissue, what it actually is. We're going to then go into the history of adipose tissue and different reasons why different people store different amounts. We're going to talk about genetics. We're going to be talking about the influence of hormones on your hunger and how full you get. We're going to talk about calories, what they are, why they matter, do they matter? We'll talk about it in a second. We're going to be talking about why you do not need to be hungry to lose weight. It's such a massive societal misconception that you need to be starving to lose weight. Not true at all. And then we're going to also run through some meal examples. All right, so what is adipose tissue? Adipose tissue is connective tissue that is 90% fat and water. However, it does also contain immune cells, nerve cells, and blood vessels. So it's actually really, really important. A lot of people don't actually understand that. It's really important. It is also found almost entirely throughout your entire body. It's found under the skin, around the organs, also inside your bones, organs, and tissue. So really important, and honestly, it's everywhere. And it is an endocrine organ. So your adipose tissue contains a lot of things and is so important that it's actually an organ. It is really important for your energy storage and release, your temperature regulation. Your temperature regulation is actually one of the main roles of your adipose tissue. It protects your organs. It is really important for your hormone regulation and production. It is really important for your full hormone release. So your basically the reason you get full at the end of every meal is because of your fat tissue talking to your brain, basically. It's really important for your insulin sensitivity, and it's also really important for your immune system. All right, so when we're talking about the difference between males and females, there's actually quite a massive difference there. So females require a far higher percentage of total body fat in comparison to males. So females require 13%. If we drop below 13%, our body basically doesn't really know what's going on and it freaks out a little bit. Whereas males can bring their levels all the way down to 3% before their hormones start getting affected. For females, estrogen plays a massive role in where it is, so where it's stored and how much is stored. It especially promotes the distribution of fat underneath your skin. So we store a lot under our skin and also around our hips and thighs in an effort to protect our reproductive organs. When we're talking about males, on the other hand, as we mentioned, they can bring their levels down to 3%. They have testosterone floating around, which actually promotes fat burning. So males often have a far harder time storing fat. And it also, with the role of testosterone, promotes muscle growth. However, unlike women, we will find that, we store quite a lot around here and under our skin, males store fat around their organs, which is not great. So historically, if you are someone who finds that you can eat exactly the same thing as the person next to you, but you will actually gain quite a lot of weight, it probably means that your grandmother's 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 grandfather survived the famine. Historically, it was a massive, massive advantage to be able to store so much fat. But if you were going through a famine or any form of food scarcity, you were way more likely to survive. And so if you are someone who stores fat really easily, that's great. It means that genetically, someone in your family line survived something horrible where there wasn't enough food. So good for you. However, in today's food climate, where we have supermarkets full of food, we don't have to hunt for food anymore, we don't have to really put any effort at all into finding food, especially with how many supermarkets we have on every single corner, it is quite a disadvantage. So that's historically why storing adipose tissue was important, why it was a good thing. Genetically, so if your grandfather's 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 grandmother went through a famine, those genetics are in you. And according to research, between 40 to 70% of how your body stores and distributes adipose tissue is down to genetics, which is huge. That is huge. Just think about that. That is massive. Yes, you still need to be exposed to a high-calorie environment for your body to store that, but that is massive. The influence of those genetics on how your body stores adipose tissue is massive. They actually did a study looking at, they got adopted kids in this family, fed them exactly the same thing as their non-biological brothers and sisters, and they found that these kids grew up with a far higher amount of body tissue, adipose tissue, and that correlated very strongly with their biological parents. So it doesn't really matter the environment, it matters about genetics, which is something that a lot of people lose sight of. They, associate your weight with your morality, which is there's no correlation there at all, and genetics plays a massive, massive role. So when we're talking about hormones, there are 5 main hormones determining how easy it is for you to put on adipose tissue. So when we're talking about leptin, that is produced by your fat cells. It is one of the main hormones released by your fat cells, and that is the I'm full hormone. When we're talking about ghrelin, that is the I'm hungry hormone, and it is released and produced by the stomach when it is empty. When we have testosterone, that promotes fat burn, so that's why males can bring their levels of fat down quite low, because just the amount of testosterone floating around in their systems in comparison to females is quite different. With estrogen, it promotes fat storage because our bodies are basically, if you're a female, is preparing to have a child, basically. Having a kid uses a lot of energy, and our body is basically going, yep, we need to hoard a bunch of energy to be prepared all the time. That's why if you're going through menopause, you will find that how you distribute fat is really different to how you did pre-menopause, because your body is basically going, oh yeah, we don't need to store this much adipose tissue, so you'll lose quite a lot under your skin, but you'll find that it kind of accumulates in your lower tummy area. So that's basically the role of estrogen and how it influences your adipose tissue storage as you age. And then with cortisol, so if you are really stressed, your body goes, we can't tell whether this is a bear chasing us or whether this is our boss that has just given us a heap of work 5 minutes before we're meant to go home. We might need to run really soon. So if you're stressed a lot and your body is always releasing high amounts of cortisol, your body goes, we're going to store as much energy as possible because we might have to run at any point, and we want to make sure that we're ready for that. So that's what's happening when you're really stressed, if you find that you are, putting on a little bit extra weight. When we're talking about your metabolism is ultimately just the way that your body uses different substrates, so those different macronutrients, how it uses them for fuel on a cellular and physiological level. That is it. That is it. That is the definition of metabolism. So when people say, I have a fast metabolism or a slow metabolism, it's not speed, it's how efficient their body is at burning different substrates, basically. I will touch on the fact that your metabolism can be strongly influenced by heaps of different factors, not just your genetics and your hormones, but also your age, gender, and your activity. So that's really important to note. There are heaps of factors influencing your metabolism and your adipose tissue storage. A lot of them aren't inside your control, only several of them are. So the ones that aren't inside your control was the health of your mother when she gave birth to you, when she was pregnant with you, whether she was overweight, what her nutrition was like, whether she smoked, whether she was stressed, what her activity was like. We've got your genetics, gender, your age, and your hormones. Massive, massive impact on how your body stores adipose tissue. You can't really do anything about that. And then your early childhood feeding habits. So from the get-go, if your parents instilled in you either healthy or not healthy eating habits, how you looked at food, whether you looked at food as, this food is good, this food is bad, that stays with you. The factors that are in your control is firstly your diet and your physical activity, and then some of your environmental and social factors. All right, so talking about calories. Calories is a really interesting one. A lot of people don't know this, but it was a concept that was developed in the 1850s that basically talks about the amount of heat that's required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. Really interesting way of measuring how useful our food is in our body, huh? So when people say, I'm in a surplus or I'm in a deficit, or if you go on social media and you're like, how do I lose weight? And they're like, you need to be in an aggressive deficit. What they're talking about is basically how many calories you are eating in relation to how many calories your body is burning. So if you're in a surplus, it basically means that you are eating more than your body needs to sustain your life and your activity on a physiological and cellular level. When this happens, your body stores it in case it needs it for later. Because on a very basic biological level, our body doesn't know that we are in a very food-dense environment, and it doesn't know that we aren't going to get chased by a bear tomorrow, or we're not going to go without food for a week. It doesn't know that. So that's what's happening if you're in a surplus. When you're in maintenance, basically means the amount you need to survive and the amount you're eating is the same. When you're in a deficit, it means that the amount you are needing to survive and the amount you are eating is slightly less, meaning that difference there, so the amount you're needing to survive and the amount you're actually eating, your body uses this much from your fat stores. So that's what's happening. It also does, however, take some protein from your muscles. So if you are in a deficit, you will lose a little bit of muscle mass as well. That being said, calories aren't great. Like if you are approaching weight loss with the belief of I need to count all my calories, I need 2,500 calories every single day, and I need to read the back of packets, and I need to know what's in it so I can not have 10 calories over. Basically, there are heaps of things that can influence whether 4 almonds equals 9 calories for you versus 9 calories for me. There's heaps of things that can influence that. Firstly, our gut microbiome. How our body digests food in our digestive tract is different for everybody based on the bacteria that is in your system. Secondly, your metabolism. So your body digests different foods differently based on the complexity of their structure. So that's 2 major things that influences whether your body actually uses the 9 calories in those 4 almonds or whether that actually drops down to 3 calories in your system. Outside of the body, whether that food is processed or not. So let's say we have 200 calories from something super processed and then 200 calories from a carrot, for example. How your body approaches those calories will be different. They actually did a study looking at 2 different populations, both on exactly the same amount of calories, and one on a super processed diet and one on a supernatural diet. And the one on the supernatural diet lost a lot more weight than the one on the processed diet, even though they were exactly the same amount of calories. Whether the food's cooked or not influences how many calories it has, and the age of the food. So if it's a plant, if the food is a month old, because a carrot can sit in a supermarket for like 3 months before it starts getting old, or whether it's picked straight up the ground and put straight in a pot, that will influence how many calories it has in it. This study here basically supports that. It says that calorie labels rely on outdated approximations, ignoring factors like food processing, individual energy expenditure, gut microbiome, and basically all the factors that can significantly impact how our body actually absorbs those calories. So do keep that in mind. Calorie counting is not something that anyone should ever do. Let me rephrase that. When we're talking about calorie counting, it does have a place in athletes. Specifically in athletes. Say, for example, if you had a pro MMA fighter and he wanted to lose X amount of weight in X amount of weeks for a competition, sure, we'd probably get him tracking his food then and counting his calorie then. General population who is trying to approach health in a sustainable way and a healthy way, don't count your calories. It's not worth it. It ultimately is not a reflection of the nutrition of the food that you're eating. And as soon as you understand the roles of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and the fact that there is fast release energy in carbohydrates that is very nutrient light, and then you've got the calories from carbohydrates which are very nutrient dense, you don't care about calories anymore, you're just looking at its nutrients. All right, so really, really important takeaway message. It's going to be in the pop quiz because it's so important. Nutrition over calories every single time. Every single time. You will see on social media, if you guys watch the same kind of stuff that I do, it's, all these teenagers saying, I had 3 months worth of chicken and broccoli and rice and I've got washboard abs. Be like me and eat what I eat. Comment this word and I'll send you my meal plan. They probably got to the end of that 3 months with a super impaired immune system. Their body was probably super physiologically stressed, and they were probably super deficient in a bunch of nutrients because they were counting their calories, not their nutrition. As point number 1 basically says that counting calories is not sustainable because ultimately it isn't. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I absolutely do not want to be having to look at the back of my food packets and my sauce packets and everything every single time I cook, all worried about numbers. Like, leave that at home. Not for me. Too mentally expensive. And then important point number 2 is you do not have to be hungry ever to be in a calorie deficit. If you are focusing on nutrient dense, calorie light foods such as vegetables, they are really high in fiber, and you will accidentally be in a deficit very easily and you will never be hungry. All right, so when we're talking about strategies of weight loss, strategy number 1, as I mentioned before, prioritize your vegetables and your fiber high foods because they will make you feel really, really full. They are really good for your gut microbiome. They are really good for your digestive tract, and you will accidentally be in a deficit and lose weight without even really trying. So if you can make 50% of your main meal of the day be vegetables, whether that is fresh vegetables, frozen vegetables, canned vegetables, in my life, fresh In my life, frozen vegetables are a staple. They're so easily, they're pre-cut already. You get a bunch in one packet, so you don't have to spend $5 on one silver beet. You can actually spend $5 on like 6 different types of vegetables. Amazing. Oh, amazing. Strategy number 2, prioritize your protein. Protein is the most satiating macronutrient of all 3 of them. So that means that you get fuller for longer, and basically you have to eat less to get fuller. So if you can prioritize making quarter of your plate protein, whether that is your animal or whether that is your plant protein, make sure you're not under eating that, because if you are finding that you are having quite a lot of energy crashes throughout the day, your sleep is really poor, whether you are waking up tired or whether you know that your sleep across the 8 hours is really poor, and you're getting sick a lot, it could be because you're under eating your protein. So do keep that in mind, that quarter of your plate, whether your plate is this big or whether it's this big, should be protein. Number 3, decreasing processed foods. Now, processed foods, yes, they have a lot of applicability when it comes to your general health, but when it comes to what we're talking about now, which is adipose tissue storage, most processed foods are very nutrient light and calorie dense, which is something that I want you guys to be really mindful of. Is this food calorie dense or is it nutrient dense? Food is never good or bad, it always has a role in the body, but when we're talking about processed foods, often they are more calorie dense than they are nutrient dense, especially the snacky foods, so all of the pastries, the slices, the chocolate, the lollies, those sorts of things, and all of your energy drinks. I know I touched on it in the last seminar that I ran, so I see a few familiar faces, but I will touch quite quickly on calorie dense, nutrient light hydration sources. So when we're talking about soda, for example, that actually requires water from your body to digest it. So it's not actually hydrating you, it is really high in sugar, which is calorie dense, and it is not very nutrient dense. Whereas if you have water, and I know a lot of people don't like the taste of water, that's totally fine, flavor it with something. Flavor it with artificial sweetener drops, flavor it with fruit, flavor it with lemon juice, whatever it happens to be, but your body will thank you and your health will thank you, and it's also a really good way to aid in your digestion. If you're having a glass of water with your meal, you will also get fuller. So that's also a really good way to just make sure you're not overeating those fast release carbohydrates. Really good way of decreasing your processed food is to swap a muesli bar out for a tin of tuna at lunch with some cheese salami or a boiled egg. That is a very filling snack, swapped out from a very calorie light snack, calorie dense snack. For dinner, I know that a lot of people do lean on takeaways and processed foods when they are short of time or mental energy. And I know that at the end of an 8-hour shift, it can be really hard to motivate yourself to actually cook a dinner, especially if you have to spend half an hour making it, then you've got to eat it, and then you've got to do the dishes, and it's rinse and repeat, it's horrible. But if you can get 2 to 3 recipes, which you'll go to, which you absolutely love, and meal prep them, and when I say that, I mean take your favorite meal and make more of it. Make sure you've got enough to bring for lunch the next day or dinner the next day if you know you're going to have a very busy week. Strategy number 4 is when we're talking about sugar cravings. I know that a lot of us do crave sugar before bed. Make sure you are eating enough protein at dinner. When we are craving sugar, it's likely that we are actually still hungry and our body needs something, but we don't know how to listen to our body and what it needs, and so we put fast release carbohydrates into it, which is not what it needs, especially before bed. So even if you think you slept well, you would have slept better if you didn't have that before bed. So really good before dinner snacks is yogurt with fruit. You can have a fruit tea if you do have that kind of sweet taste but you don't want anything heavier. You could have frozen yogurt ice blocks, you could have dark chocolate, you could have some roasted chickpeas, for example. There are just heaps of ways that you can get around that. Strategy number 5, strength training. So this is kind of the exercise section of the talk, I suppose. But when we're talking about strength training, it is putting your muscles under tension for an extended period of time. the effects of that is your body releases glucagon and growth hormone, which means that even a couple of hours after you've finished exercising, your body will still be having an elevated heart rate and still be burning more calories at rest than you would have if you hadn't exercised. High protein and high fiber diet paired with strength training has been shown to be one of the most effective strategies for weight loss. So do keep that in mind. Fiber, as we were talking about before, half of your plate should be vegetables. When we're talking about high protein, we talked about all those examples before, but if you can pair those two with exercise and strength training specifically, you will find that you very easily shed weight. I know that a lot of people find that they try cardio, especially when they're trying to lose weight. Cardio is a really hard one because it often involves either running or walking, and that is very expensive on your joints, especially if you're carrying a little bit more weight than can be accommodated by your cartilage and your ligaments. So really, really great ways of getting around this is firstly, swimming. It's, it can be quite scary, but even just doing some aqua jogging can be awesome. That's a really great way of doing some cardio, but also getting some strength training in there if you're doing long reaches and you are exercising the muscles at the back of your arms. Yoga can be great. This can be done from, the comfort of your own home. If you are interested in any sort of like stretches or yoga at all, come see me afterwards. I've recently discovered Mandy Morrison. Remember that? She's amazing. Look her up on YouTube. 10 out of 10. Or you can do some slow, heavy weightlifting. That sounds really complicated, and I know a lot of your brains probably went, I don't want to go to the gym, that's really scary. Slow, heavy weight training can be you leaning up against the wall and like doing a push-up on the wall at home. It can be you standing there and doing this and exercising, your quad there. It could be you doing squats in the comfort of your own home. It doesn't have to be complicated, it doesn't have to be scary, it doesn't have to be hard. Ultimately, it's about finding something you enjoy doing that is going to work for you. All right, so when we're talking about daily weight loss, firstly, prioritize your nutrition, which is everything we've just talked about, and moving daily. Whether that is swimming, whether that is yoga, whether that's doing some stretches, whether that is, working out and doing some exercises in your own home, just make sure you are moving your body some way. Secondly, improve your sleep. So that is, when we're talking about sleep hygiene, it is, getting off your phone a couple hours before bed, making sure you're not watching a very stressful or scary movie before bed, just finding ways to relax your brain before sleep, and also decreasing your stress. So I know that work can be really stressful sometimes. Try and leave work at work. It can have a massive impact on your sleep. And lastly, make sure that if you are, especially if you've started a new set of medications and you are finding that you are storing a little bit more adipose tissue, just have a chat to your GP about it, because that could be one of the main factors in you storing that excess adipose tissue. So when we've got, a whole day of eating, breakfast, only eat when you're hungry. I know a lot of people say, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. It's only important when you need it. So for breakfast, this example here is high in fiber, carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates, and fat. So you can have this as a smoothie, you can have this as overnight oats or Wheat Bix, or you can have it just fresh. So just some oats, Wheat Bix, oats or Wheat Bix, sprinkled with some chia seeds, flax seeds, or linseeds, with some fruit and some yogurt. Super easy, super simple, super convenient. For lunch, it's really high. This example is really high fiber and protein. You can have this in a salad, you can have it as a sandwich, you can have it as a wrap, or you can have it cooked. And it is literally just fundamentally meat with vegetables with a boiled egg. You can have the vegetables cooked, you can have them fresh, you can have that meat canned, you can have it be a deli meat, you can have it cooked from the night before, whatever floats your boat. For your snack, it should be high fiber and high fat, because having fat means that you have got sustained energy, because you don't get that energy rise and that energy dip with fat the same way you do for carbohydrates. So with this snack here, it's cheese, salami with crackers, and then another option is carrot sticks with hummus, and then you've also got the third option of a wee bottle of yogurt with some nuts and seeds in it. Super simple, super convenient. Ultimately, you want meals and a way of eating that you enjoy, that is sustainable for your everyday life, because ultimately, that's what it's all about. You don't want to lose an extreme amount of weight across 6 months, because then your body will naturally put it back on, especially if you haven't developed sustainable habits that you can keep up with. When we're talking about dinner, as we mentioned before, you want half of your plate be vegetables, whether that's cooked or fresh. You want a quarter of it being your meat and your plant protein, and then you want some fat in there too. And ultimately, that's all it boils down to when we're talking about making sure you are feeding your body appropriately. Your body is always talking to you, so if you are tired, if you've got dipping energy, if you are getting sick a lot, it is talking to you. Your body is one of those things that will never lie. Whatever it's going through, it is trying to tell you what it needs. Ultimately, what we've got to do is listen to what your body is telling you and then figure out what it's telling you. So listen to your symptoms and basically say, oh yeah, this sounds like your body might be going through this, and then provide you solutions. You should be approximately 80 to 85% full at the end of every meal. And as I mentioned before, again, you do not ever have to be hungry to lose weight. I will touch quite quickly on quick fix fad diets. So a lot of people say, oh, I lose this amount of weight in this amount of weeks. When you drop below 25% in a calorie deficit, as we were talking before, calorie deficit is when you need this amount and you're eating this amount. When you drop to 25% or more, you put your body into famine mode. It doesn't know that this is a choice you're making. It thinks, oh my goodness, we no longer have food. We need to store fat. That's what will happen, and you will also significantly impact how your body can release hormones, which will have a major influence on your daily life. So if you have been someone who's lost a lot of weight very quickly, you might have actually found that you put it back on quite quickly as well, because as soon as you stop eating in starvation mode, your body goes, we can relax again. That's exactly what happens. All right, so take home points. Remember the 5 strategies that we talked about. So focus on high fiber, high protein, replace your processed snacks with real food, be mindful of your sugar cravings, and exercise how you want to. Secondly, stay mindful of your energy levels and your fullness levels, and then with your main meal of the day, make sure half of it is vegetables, quarter is your starchy carbohydrates, quarter of it is your protein, and then you've got some fat in there too. And ultimately, approaching fat loss in a sustainable way is the only way that it will actually work. How we can help you is we do exercise programs, nutrition programs, but ultimately the most important thing that we offer is body composition testing. So when we're talking about body composition testing, there are 2 different things we do. Firstly, and this is only run once a month down here because I'm predominantly based in Dunedin, so we only visit Invercargill once a month, and it is the Monday and Tuesday after every nutrition talk. And we run 8 different tests and give you 19 metrics looking at your health and your performance. So when we're talking about performance, it is your life performance as well. So whether you have got any muscle imbalances, we look at your bone health, we look at, as I mentioned before, whether you are storing fat underneath your skin or around your organs. We look at your blood pressure, we look at your blood sugar, we look at your blood ketones, we look at so many different metrics that is offered literally nowhere else in New Zealand or Australia. You can't get this done anywhere else because it's very expensive to run, and you need to know what you're looking at for it to work. And a lot of medical professionals don't go down this route because they don't care about performance, and a lot of gyms, for example, don't go down this route because they don't care about health. So we're the only place that kind of does it all. And then, okay, so this one is our full body Warrant of Fitness. Recommended testing is every 6 months. So the first time I see you, I want us to do this because we get a lot of data and we get your starting point. For this one here, it is a 20-minute session where we run a body scan, which still tells you whether you have got muscle imbalances, how strong your bones are, and how hydrated your cells are. But this is basically a checkup service. So ultimately how it would run is we do the 60-minute full body Warrant of Fitness the first time we see you, and then the second time we see you, which is roughly every 8 weeks, we'd be doing this one here. So you get a lot out of working with us. Doing this one, we can also make sure that the strategies we are implementing are still relevant, how you've been finding them, what's been working, what hasn't been working. But this is a lot more affordable as well, so this is $50 in comparison to $190. Even though you do get a lot with that 60-minute service, this is great if you do just want to have a checkup and have a one-on-one chat with me. I know we covered a lot. We covered a lot of things. Do you guys have any questions for me? Alcohol. No, I kind of stayed away from alcohol. Alcohol is a funny one. Do you have a specific question so I can answer a specific question?
Just how much having alcohol does in gains you're making with nutrition?
Yeah, so with alcohol, it's a really interesting one because alcoholic beverages are usually very calorie dense and don't contain any nutrients at all, especially RDIs. If I say that right? RTDs. Look at me, I don't drink, so I wouldn't know. But they are really calorie dense. Even if you are getting the kind of sugar-free options, they do still act as that fast-release energy. And so they do still have that energy rise and energy fall. With, yeah, it's an interesting one. A lot of people don't eat properly when they are quite heavily drinking. You know, for an evening, you wouldn't have a very high protein, high fiber meal right before a party, right? Right before you were about to drink a lot. That being said, if you have it infrequently or, you know, once a week, one drink a week, absolutely not going to hurt at all, especially if it's something that you value in terms of, oh, I go out with my friends once a week and this is something I value in terms of my social connections. That is totally fine as well. Something I will say about alcohol, and a lot of people don't know this, but there are three things that have been definitively linked to cancer. Number 1 is alcohol of any form has been linked to cancer. Number 2 is burnt meats. And number 3 is processed meat. So that is all of your Belgium, you know, all of your meats that is only 20% meats. So those are the 3 things that have been definitively linked to cancer. So do keep that in mind. That being said, I will never ever say something is good or bad. It has a role in the body, and ultimately, if you know, drinking alcoholic beverages is something that you value in terms of your mental health or something that you value in terms of your social connections, that's totally fine as well. Any other questions? Oh, no questions. I clearly did a good job. I'll take that as a compliment. No other questions before we, yeah?
So what would be examples of fats that you've got? You've got 2 thumbs of fats and
Yep.
what would be an example of something?
So really good forms of fat is your nuts and seeds, and also your oil that you've cooked with. Those are your unsaturated fats, so those are the ones that have a good impact on your cholesterol. When we're talking about fats that have been associated with having a negative impact on your cholesterol, it's debated, but could, is your cheeses and your butters, for example. So those are some sources.
So we would like sauces come into that, like ketchup, tomato sauce.
Oh yeah, so that would, yeah, no, 100%. So that would be when we're talking about carbohydrates, and it would be more simple carbohydrates because they're more calorie dense and nutrient light, but they're kind of in the middle there. Often sauces don't have a lot of fiber in them, so they go away from being complex and go towards being simple. Yes, yeah. No, they're absolutely not a problem though. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the protein powder,
Yep.
is it considered as a processed food? Or?
Yeah, so protein powder is a processed food. However, especially if you are getting one that is not full of artificial things, it can be really beneficial, especially if you have a sweet tooth before bed. that's a really good substitute because you can mix it with yogurt, you can turn it into a pudding, whatever you choose to do with the protein powder, it's great. It's also a great way to bulk up your daily intake, especially if you are someone who doesn't eat a lot of meat or who doesn't, some people struggle with eating quite a lot of protein-dense foods like quinoa that are plant-based. So protein powder is a great alternative. It definitely has a place. Definitely not bad. Definitely a great tool if you can tolerate it and find one that works for you.
As an athlete, does that kind of meal plan structure, does that change?
In terms of the general rule of thumb? So that's a really good question. So it depends on what sport you are taking part in. So if I was working with a basketball athlete, for example, or a soccer athlete, for example, or even just someone who went to the gym a lot and did high intensity workouts, we would be focusing more on the carbohydrate intake rather than the fat and the protein intake. However, if they were someone who was a marathon runner, for example, we would be focusing more on the protein and the fat intake. So the ratios change a little bit, but the general rule of thumb of 50% vegetables doesn't really change unless they are a very serious athlete, training 20 hours a week, and they need to sacrifice some of that portion of vegetables to extend out their carbohydrates, their starchier carbohydrates. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. Any other questions?
So yogurts,
Mhm.
say you have yogurt for breakfast now.
Mhm.
Any type of yogurt or just preference?
Any type of yogurt. There are different types of ones that have less sugar, and obviously you can get the higher protein ones. The higher protein ones do contain a little bit more protein, but honestly, they are also very expensive. So if you're able to, just have a bit of meat in your lunch, it will be far more worthwhile just having a standard type of yogurt rather than spending all that money on the very expensive high protein ones. When we're talking about Greek yogurt, it's all natural yogurt. It's often a lot lower in added sugars and a lot higher in probiotics, so that can be really good. But if I was to say, hey, you only can eat Greek yogurt, and you're like, oh, Greek yogurt's the worst, that's not going to be sustainable. So honestly, it's whatever works for you.
I really like the vanilla bean.
Oh yeah, no, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, no, that's all good. You have my permission. Cool. Are there any other questions? No? Okay, cool. We will get on with the pop quiz. So, I have 4 questions for you guys. Question number 1. Oh, we've got to prepare. Question number 1. True or false? Carbohydrates are fast release energy and slow release energy. If you know it, shout it out. You got to be a lot louder than that. Come on, commit. True? Yep, cool. Would you like a hat or a drink bottle? Drink bottle. So where's the drink bottle? Does it go first? Yeah. All right. True or false? 40 to 70% of how you store fat is due to your genetics.
True.
Oh, a bit slow, but hat or drink bottle?
I'll go the hat.
Oh, you're welcome. All right. Okay, should you count calories for a sustainable nutrition weight loss? I'm going to give it to you because you waited until even though I saw you hat or drink bottle? Yeah, hat or drink bottle? Drink bottle. You waited so patiently for me to finish. And last one. Last question is, what percentage of your plate should be vegetables? You get a hat.
I just remember that last time.
Oh, yeah. Good for you. That's why you got to come regularly, yeah. All right. So in terms of our next talk, I had it written down that it was going to be about protein, but honestly, it's up to you guys. I want to help you guys as much as I can. So would you guys prefer that I talk to you about protein, or would you prefer that I talk to you about how to maintain healthy bones? All right. So have a think about that. Those who are interested about protein, chuck your hands up. Way up, I need to count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, and everyone interested to learn about bones? Oh, that was a clear winner. Okay, bones it is. All right, cool. Now that makes my job easy. All right, thank you guys so much for coming. We do have a wee feedback form on the table there. I would love for every single one of you to fill it out, because the more I can structure these talks to help you guys as best I can, the better it is for everybody. If you do have Instagram, we've got a wee QR code that you can scan. In terms of our next upcoming body composition, warrant of fitness, and so these ones here, as I mentioned before, I'm only here once a month. We operate out of YMCA and Snap Fitness. So this month, so tomorrow and Tuesday, we're at Snap Fitness. If you are interested, do come up and let me know. However, on the wee flyer stand just there, we have got a QR code and some information about the one coming up in May for YMCA. If you do have any questions about that at all, do just let me know. If you guys would like some one-on-one advice, I'm going to be hanging around for the next half an hour to just answer any questions you guys have. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming, and I hope you guys enjoyed the talk.
Thank you.